CMCSS work meeting is called to order. Mr. House.
Yes, ma'am. I hope everyone is well, and welcome back to our study session. At this time, I'm going to ask Marcia Demarest to join us virtually to actually go through the last round of budget resolutions. Marcia?
Okay. So we can share those. Is David going to share those on the screen, or we just?
Yes, David will do so in just a second.
May be at risk, but also helps them. Are we good with the study agenda now?
Yes, we're moving right into the resolution amendments. We can move down.
Okay. So tonight we're bringing budget amendments for the general purpose fund, the school nutrition fund, and the transportation fund. So the first one that we'll go over will be the general purpose fund. This first page here is our revenues. And so as we know, with the current pandemic COVID-19 situation, we have gone in and looked at our revenues and done an assessment of where we think we stand year to date. So looking at the third column there is the column where we're showing adjustments, the proposed increase or decrease. So on the tax line items, the trustee collection prior year, the circuit clerk, clerk master collections, interest and penalties, and payments in lieu of taxes, those are just related to our property tax accounts, and going in and looking at those and kind of adjusting those to actuals. Those kind of always fluctuate a little bit based on current property tax collection. So basically, if property taxes are being paid and collected on a timely basis, those other interest and penalties, trustee collection from prior years are going to be lower. So we're just making an adjustment to those. Then the next line item, local option sales tax. We have gone in and looked at, obviously with the closure of many businesses, needing to adjust that sales tax number. So we have gone in and made an adjustment of that, a reduction of $3.5 million to bring us to a estimated amount for this year of $59.5 million. The same thing there for a couple lines down on mixed drink tax, the $31,838, adjusting that for the months, that businesses are closed and people would not be buying drink liquor by the drink. Looking at tuition regular day students, we did not have any out of county students, so we removed that line completely. Tuition other, that's based on our school closure and not collecting tuition on our pre-K program for the last few months of the year. Other charges for services is based on year-to-date collections, and that's based on our fingerprinting operation. Of course, we've had that closed down for the last month or so, and we're not sure when we will open that back up. The sale of recycled materials decreased $3,300. So Bi-County ended their recycling program. So that's the amount that we would not receive based on what we had estimated in the budget. Contributions and gifts was for a grant, a small grant that we received for a summer program. So an increase there of $2,000. And then other local revenue, a decrease of $4,472. That's based on charges that we receive for our credit card processing fees when we take online payments. So a total reduction in revenue there of $4.2 million.
Okay, thank you, Marcia.
if you go on to the next page, we will, we had no adjustments to any of our state, federal, or non-revenue sources. Okay, that page is just our beginning reserves and fund balance, so no changes there. All right, if you go down to the next page, we will be on our expenses. So we have gone in and made adjustments here based on a review of all of our expense accounts. So again, looking in the third column, regular instruction, that supplies and materials amount there of $1,184. That was related to the $2,000 summer program grant that we had received. Looking at, so as you know, I think on our last round of amendments, we had made adjustments on some salary accounts. We go in and look, and anything that looks like it's potential to go over, we make adjustments, and those we look at twice. I mean, we watch them all through the year, but we usually amend them twice during the year, once in the second round of amendments and now here at year end. And those are normally just based on changes of degree and experience that people have. And periodically through the year, people will, teachers and such will get different degree changes, or we'll have positions change and new individuals come in and that pay changes. So there in the alternative school, that's $975 is based on that adjustment of education and experience. And that's the last one on that page. All right, no adjustment to any of these functional departments. Okay, other student support, the salaries there, $17,730 adjustment, again, based on education and experience. Regular instruction support amount there is $29,346 is based on education and experience, and then also the remaining portion of the summer program grant for stipends that are being paid out. And then the $126 there is related to that stipend program, or the grant summer program, the benefits for that. All right, moving on to special education, salary adjustment there based on a review of that account and education and experience. Going down to the technology account, $45,000 being put into the budget for extra summer help to process our computers. This year is one of the years that we have a turnover of a very large number of computers. And so in order to get those in and processed and ready for school next year, we will need additional help. So we have the salaries and the associated benefits for that. Adult education support, we have a vacation payout due to a retirement. So if someone is retiring and they have accumulated accrued vacation leave, that is something that by our policy is paid out. Going on to the next page. Board of Education there, again, we had a retiring employee that had some comp time paid out and then a little bit of expense for training overlap. Insurance premiums, that amount there is based on estimated losses. And so that's based on looking at kind of just preparing and potential losses related to the COVID-19, any refunds that we might have to do for parents for trips that were canceled, and then also looking at our lunch charges and knowing any unpaid balances that we have to pay that to the Child Nutrition Fund, and knowing the economy that we are in, estimating a potential there for additional losses. And then printing and communications, again, a payout there for vacation and then training overlap. Moving on to the next page, Office of the Principal, we have, again, salaries just based on education and experience. Business Affairs, we have a $6,868 adjustment there based on overtime costs. And then in Human Resources, the $241,155 increased cost for personal leave buyback. So part of our policy is that any employees that have, they're granted 3 personal days a year, and if at the end of the year they have not used any of those personal leave days, they have the option to have 1 day paid out and then the other days roll into sick leave. And with the closure and individuals not needing to use leave, we normally have approximately $5,000 that we pay out. And this year, looking at number of employees that still have 3 days of leave, we have a potential impact there of additional costs if they choose to take that option. Moving on down, operation of plant, we have 2 amounts there, one in contracted services and one in equipment for a total of $300,000. And that's related to portables, needing to get portables in place for next school year. So the movement of those portables is coming from the contracted services account, and the equipment would be for the purchase of portables. So normally our trades and industry classes build portables for us. And so with the closure of the school and not getting those portables completed, we are looking at potentially needing to purchase those. And then early childhood education, $11,078 there for substitute costs for assistance, educational assistance. Going on to the next page there, debt service, we have an adjustment there. It's really just between the proration of the principal and interest. So we have an increase in the principal cost and a decrease in the interest cost. So it's just aligning it to the actual debt schedule repayment that we have. So it's a total increase of expenditures of $800. And so with $4 million offset that we have, decrease in the revenues, we are reducing a couple of our reserves. So the $50,000 assigned for Munis systems, all of our work on that had been done, so we're removing that reserve. We would have done that anyway. And then the $4 million there that we had equipment purchases and leases, we're moving some of that out of that reserve to kind of to bring our fund balance up to the level that we want. And you'll see when we go over the budget, we are reinstituting some of that next year with some of our adjustments that we've made in next year's budget. So that's everything on the general purpose fund. Are there any questions so far, or do we want to?
Yes, ma'am. This is Charlie Patterson, if I could ask.
Go right ahead, Charlie.
Yes, all the way back up to the top. I didn't want to interrupt you there.
Okay.
Where you were saying state and federal revenues, I believe, which was right after our county that we were estimating, and you said that no changes there. Are we looking forward? I mean, there will be federal and state changes, I would assume, right? Or is that locked in? That's my question.
Right. Yeah, there should not be any changes to our state and federal funding for this year. And as far as I know, I mean, next year, we have our BEP, we've received our first BEP estimate and we have that in there. But yeah, what we've heard from the state and federal is that there would be no adjustments to anything related to this year.
Okay, thank you. That clarifies. That was a good answer to that question. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got a question.
Okay.
And you may not know this, it may be something we need to find out. But the $300,000 for portables, do we know how many portables that covers?
Yes, we do. Jim, you want to jump in?
Yeah, so on the portables, the way that is balanced out is part of the moving and the equipment required, so all the ramps and the electrical connections, all of that, part of the money comes from the year we're in, and then they get half of the upcoming year. And so I think we're moving 12 portables over this summer. Some of it has already begun.
And Jim, that'll bring us up to 100 and how many portables?
We had 106 or 107, so yeah.
Got it.
107 plus 12, I believe, is where we're at right now.
Got it. Okay.
Jim, just to make sure I understood you correctly, you said it's that 3,000 is basically half of what it'll cost us to for those 12 portables, right? There'll be another roughly $3,000 in the next budget that would pay for the rest of it.
Yeah, and the reason for the amendment here is because there were portables being built by our kids that we expected to get completed and moved, and now we've got to go out and buy the portables because those are not ready. And so then hopefully those will finish this year and we'll need less for the following summer.
Okay.
Marcia?
All right. David, if you want to scroll us on down, then we will go to Child Nutrition Fund. There's not a whole lot changing here. So on the first line item here with the revenues, USDA commodities, we've received additional allocation of commodities. So that comes in as a revenue and then also as an expense. And so that's just commodities that we receive from the USDA, and they're giving us an additional allotment. So it's $140,712 increase in revenue. If you'll scroll on down. On the expense side, we just have a few small adjustments here. We have a increase in contracted services, $199 related to a cell phone. We have in the supplies and materials, again, that $140,000 that was on the revenue side for the commodities is included in this $150,121, and then a small adjustment for software and gasoline. And then on utilities, we have an adjustment of $7,667 based on our current share allocation that we have between the GP fund and the Child Nutrition Fund. So that's an increase of expenses of $159,987. And then it nets out, of course, we had the USDA commodity revenue, so it nets out to a change in fund balance of $17,275. And that's everything for this fund. Any questions?
Yes, did you say that was 159,000, 157,000?
157,987 is the change in expenses.
Okay, thank you.
I could have said 159 when I said it, but. Okay, the next fund is our transportation fund, and the only thing that we have changing here is over on the expenses. So if you want to scroll on down to the next page, is just an adjustment on our trustee commissions. So we pay a commission to the trustee's office based on the revenue that we received, and so looking at where we're at year to date, and that's primarily related to property tax. We just needed to, and since that sits out in a line item all by itself with the under a different function than the rest of the transportation fund, we wanted to make sure to adjust that so as not to receive an audit finding for an overage in that function. So just an adjustment there of $3,667 related to trustee commissions. That is everything for that fund and everything for all of the amendments.
Thank you, Marcia. At this time, we'll move to item number 2, which is the 2020-21 consolidated proposed budget. And as you guys know, COVID-19 has taken a toll on many economies across not only the nation, but the world. Unfortunately, that's no different here in Tennessee and in Montgomery County. due to a projected loss of nearly $10 million in sales tax revenue, we've been forced to make some major revisions in the 2020-21 budget. As one of the fastest growing school systems in the state of Tennessee, we were poised to address needs of approximately $6 million in requested new positions, as well as cost of living adjustment, step adjustment, and market analysis improvements. All of these things have been eliminated. Our reserves have been reduced to a minimum in this budget that you'll see in just a moment, and cuts were made to other integral areas in the school system as well, like electronic textbooks, our professional development and learning department, school allocations, capital projects. These changes were made in an effort to protect as many jobs as possible and ensure that the district meets BEP requirements while continuing to provide the best educational services for our students. If by any chance revenues improve, we're committed to addressing employee compensation by seeking amendments in the future to include step increases and COLA increases. With that said, I'd like to turn it over to Marcia again to take a detailed look.
Okay. So when I go through this, I'll try to stop on each page and give you a chance to ask questions. So as Mr. House said, we've worked very hard on trying to make this, a balanced budget and appropriate budget. And of course, as he mentioned, it is very lean with not a lot of changes. We did have the only adjustments related to pay and benefits was related to a medical insurance increase that's required of 5%. And then we do have a small one-time supplemental pay that would be allotted to any current employees that we would pay out next year in the budget to anyone that's still with us next year. So what we do have related to positions are all related to growth. We have 50.5 teacher positions, 10 of those being in SPED, 37 of them being in the regular education. Of course, I know we've talked before at previous board sessions about the BEP waiver. And so with the BEP waiver, we do have 30 teacher positions that we can utilize for that BEP waiver, bringing that teacher adjustment to 20.5. Educational assistants, we have an increase of 72. 60 of those are related to the teacher resident program, which is what the BEP waiver allows us to have the 60 teacher residents. 3 of those are related to just general growth, and 2 of those are related to our Spanish language program. We do have 25 SPED positions, SPED educational assistant positions. 10 of those are related to growth and 15 are anticipated for one-to-one assistance that we get requested throughout the year. And then we do have 4 custodian positions, again, related to growth. So I just wanted to kind of give that as a broad picture of what we have as far as changes, related to employee and pay. So here we have, again, the estimated revenue pages. This is the local revenue. We have, again, made an adjustment to our sales tax for this year. So we had the adjustment in our BEP or sales tax in the amendments. And then again, normally we would have a growth expected here, but we do have a 2% reduction, which is based on looking back at history and the last time that we had a recession and looking at what we saw as a reduction there. We did, in order to try to have to meet maintenance of effort, we have put $640,000 in our current property tax line item so that our local revenue for this year will be equal to the amended local revenue that we have, or the local revenue for next year will be equal to the amended local revenue that we have for this year. So really that's the highlight of most of those revenue changes, the $1.19 million decrease in sales tax, the $640,000 increase in current property tax. Any questions on that page before we move on? Okay. We can go on. All right, so here on our state and federal and non-revenue sources, up in state revenues, the BEP, which is the second line item there, we do have an increase this year of $8.59 million. That was based on putting a 2% increase in the instructional salary component. Originally, the governor had come out with a 4%, and then as the economy started having the effects of the coronavirus, he did go in and amend their budget and change that to a 2% instructional salary increase. And pretty much everything else on that section is pretty status quo to the year before. The two line items, other state education funds and other vocational funds that you see that we had last year and we do not have this year, those were specific grants that we had received. And so we had put those in the budget this year when we had them, but they are not necessarily recurring. The same thing when you look down at the first three line items of the federal revenues, all of those items were related to specific grants that we had received last year that were awarded to us, and we would not have those going forward. Everything else pretty much in that section is status quo. And then looking down at non-revenue sources, we have the capital lease proceeds there. We have, last year we had the big turnover of computers, which is what's necessitating this extra summer help this year. But we, next year would be a smaller lease that we would have. So the lease proceeds that we receive a smaller amount. And then operating transfers there is a decrease, and that's related to a decrease in our indirect cost rate. Questions? All right. So here we show our beginning fund balance and we show our reserves. So the beginning fund balance that we're estimating is $20 million, and that does reflect savings that we are anticipating in this year. We did put a curtailment on spending. Nothing that is absolute, unless it's absolutely necessary, are we spending. We've cut back, of course, on staff development for this year with individuals not going anywhere. And so we have reflected those anticipated savings in our beginning fund balance. And then there again, you'll just see where we have our reserves at this point in time, for the beginning reserves. All right. All right, so here on expenditures, what I'll do on these pages, I mean, I'm happy to cover anything on there that you have a question about, but since there is very little that's changing, I'm going to just kind of hit the highlights, and again, would be happy to answer any questions that you have. Regarding pay, one thing I didn't mention earlier is that our teacher retirement rate did decrease this year. The amount of the employer expense for that went from a 10.63% to 10.27%. So in the retirement accounts, we will see some reductions related to that decrease. So looking, this might be a little hard. So when I refer to, so over on the left-hand line, we have our object codes. So I'll kind of try to direct you to that. So looking at line object code 140, summer camp, summer stipends and tutors, you'll see a reduction there of $277,700. And that is one of the items that we did go in and adjust. We are moving that over to be grant funded for next year. And so that was one area where we made an adjustment on working at the budget. The line there, 163, educational assistance. Of course, I mentioned earlier, we had our teacher resident programs, which are, I guess, pretty much funded by our BEP waiver. And so the increase there is for all of our educational assistants that we have, those both in the related to growth and the teacher resident. Looking down to line 399 that says virtual school contracted services facilities. So that's where we have any contracted services for, we have a virtual platform that we contract with. We also pay our residential, like students that are in residential treatment facilities where we have to pay their daily education cost. That is in that line. That has a $381,000 this year related to the increase in the virtual platform. There were initially some line items that we also did cut from there related to a Naviance program. Looking at line 429, instructional supplies and materials, we have a decrease there of $431,000. And that was one of the areas that we did go in and make cuts that was related to school allocations, and looking at the balances, we did make some cuts there. Line 430, electronic textbooks, a decrease of $150,000, and that was one of the areas where we decided to go in. And then line 535, student fee waivers, $243,472. We did make an adjustment there. And that's, again, an allocation that we send to the schools, and we took into account the current allocations that they have. So that's pretty much the highlight of the adjustments on that page. Are there any specific questions? The next one, our alternative school, basically there's just a small adjustment in there of $3,020. Nothing in particular, kind of a mixture of probably medical insurance going up on that account, but significantly changing there. All right. Special education. So this area is, we do have like a $2,982,489 increase in here. So again, this was one of the areas where we have new positions. We have the 10 teacher positions. You'll see up there in object code 116. We have an increase of $578,000 in that line item. The educational assistants, they're on code 163. We have an increase there of $1,289,147. And then the next large increase in that account, the 207, the medical insurance, has an increase of $838,682. I mentioned earlier we had the 5% increase, and so with this area having a large number of employees, that created a higher cost in that area. And then you see on 329 or 399 and 429 a decrease there, and that is related to, during the year, you may remember during budget amendments that we received from the state high cost reimbursement money that we have to budget. We receive revenue and we have to budget that in our general purpose fund. And so the decrease there is because during the year, that was one of the areas where we put our high cost reimbursement. Questions? All right. Vocational education, this area had a change of about $63,000. There was a little bit of an increase in teachers, and that's really just kind of a change of, I guess, there were no new positions. It's just a matter of when we pull and look at the salary level of the teachers this year, it's adjusted a little bit from last year. We had a $26,968 increase in medical insurance. The trades and industrial construction materials there has a $100,000 decrease. And that's just based on their need of what they need to finish out the projects in their class. And then the vocational equipment has a $40,000. There's no questions. We'll move ahead. Student services, there really isn't a whole lot changing here. Overall, that whole area has a decrease of $13,103, and it's not any in particular significant items. Justin. All right. Again here, health services overall just has a decrease of $9,866, and that's just a matter of different, like medical insurance. When we look at that for the budget, we look at current participation. So, it depends on, I guess, who in that departmental area has our insurance and what they have. That just adjusts a little bit every year. Other student support. So here we had an increase of $42,725 overall. And basically looking at evaluation and testing, line 322, object code. We have an increase there of $112,296. And that's related to anticipated student numbers for ACT and advanced placement tests. That's where that's paid out of. And then we did have a decrease under 790, the equipment, just equipment that was purchased this current year that's not requested for next year. And then I guess nothing really significant there unless you have any questions. All right. Regular instruction support. So this area had an increase of $270,346. Some of this, I guess, the significant areas related to in 399 contracted services, an increase of $87,000. And then 524 in-service staff development, 188,800. And both of those items are related to our teacher resident program. So where we have the savings based on the BEP waiver, part of that is salaries, and then part of that is related to tuition and supports for that program. Questions? All right. Alternative school support, again, nothing really significantly changing here. Everything's, no new positions, everything's pretty much status quo. All right, here on special education support, we did have a decrease here of $189,897, and that was related to, we had some funds in this year's budget for the transition school to work program, and that program had ended, so that was not carried forward in next year's budget. Vocational education support, again, nothing really changing here. There's a decrease primarily related to not having medical, whoever, I guess, in that area does not have medical insurance for next year. All right, here, technology administration, nothing really significantly changing. Temporary personnel, the 168 object code there, a decrease of $20,000, and that's related to the summer help for the computers. So next year, so this summer we have the large share of computers to turn around, and then the next year it will be a smaller number. All right, technology classroom instruction. So here we do have a decrease of $12.9 million. And that's all related to that instructional technology equipment. And that was for the leased computers. Last year we had large computer lease. And so that's reflected there. And then this year we have just the smaller, I guess, more at, normal size computer lease. Adult education support, again, nothing really significantly changing here. It's all related to salary and benefits. Board of Education, we have a $240,000 decrease here. So primarily it's in a couple of line items. So trustee commissions, which you'll see there on Object Code 510. We are showing a decrease for next year based on the fact that we have revenue decreases on the sale resulting from the sales tax. And then again, on the uninsured losses, you'll see a decrease there because that's related to the amendment that we had in the budget this year for the anticipating additional losses related to the coronavirus pandemic. All right, here, Director of Schools, we have a $30,395 increase. That's related to line items that you'll see. So 161 administrative assistant and 189 the section there that's director of continuous improvement. So there's a reclassification of that position. It moves from one object code to another, and a restructuring of that position and resulted in that change there. Printing and communications, nothing really significant here, 12,560 increase, and it's pretty much all related to medical insurance. Office of the Principal, we actually have a $96,477 decrease here. It's related to just really the changeover of positions when we have, I guess, more experienced people leaving that have higher salaries and less experienced people coming in with a lower salary. We see some fluctuation in some of those accounts, particularly the assistant principal account had a decrease of $4,381. And then we did have the medical insurance there again, had a fairly 138,518, again related to the number of people that are in the that school account. All right. Business affairs, we had an overall decrease of 89,116. And again, that's just the difference of primarily that 105 and the related benefits for supervisors. And that was just a changeover of individuals in the positions. The next one, textbook processing, nothing really changing at $6,000 decrease overall. Again, just related to I guess the benefits that individuals have. Okay, human resources, we do have a $259,623 decrease in that account. It's primarily related to that personal leave reimbursement. You'll see there on line 189 where we had put in the amendments, the anticipated higher amount to pay out this year, and then next year that's going back to its normal level. That's pretty much that. All right, operation of plant. We do have overall a $1.6 million decrease here. And so there's a few line items looking at 399, the relocate portables. So we do have 166,000, from where we have amended additional costs this year, as Jim had talked about, and then going back to our, I guess, normal level next year of 300,000 there. Looking at electricity, we do have a decrease there of about 558,000. About 448,000 of that is related to I guess, looking at the allocation of utilities between the general purpose and the child nutrition fund. And so they've adjusted that allocation between what child nutrition will be paying. So when we get to their budget, you'll see an increase in their electricity utility line item. Then looking down at 499, their portables, we have $100,000 there related to, I guess, buying, I guess, parts for the portable. If you go on down to the next line or next page, you'll see on 790 we have a decrease of 100,000. So that's basically related to the purchase of the portable equipment and the purchase of, I guess, parts, ramps and stuff for the portable when we replace those. And then on 711 furniture, you'll see a $500,000 decrease there. And that is one area where we did go in and we are adjusting our furniture account to only allow for growth next year. Nothing on a replacement cycle basis, but taking that down to the bare minimum and just having enough in there to cover growth. Anything on that? They have a lot of accounts. And okay. Maintenance of plant. So we do have, again, we have a fairly large decrease in this amount, 894,135. If you will look at line 399, capital projects, contracted services, as Mr. Housing mentioned earlier, that is one area where we did go in and make cuts, and that's related to capital project improvements that we fund out of the general purpose fund. And we cut 758,379 out of that line item. Line 717 there, 258,000, the bottom line there, 258,111. And I think that was just based on equipment that we purchased last year that we didn't need to purchase this year. All right. Early childhood education actually has a decrease of 453,470. It's related to the teacher line item and the educational assistance. And again, that's just where, based on the experience and grade and experience level that those positions were in last year versus what we have in there for this year, a decrease in both of those line items. More experienced people leaving and less experienced individuals coming into that. All right. Debt service, principal payment on lease. So we do have a new lease this year, or we'll have an additional lease next year, and so that increase in that. And then if you'll scroll down to the next line item, next page, the interest portion of that lease will be going up. So normally when we enter a new lease, we have to make our lease payment at the beginning of the lease. So we have less interest payment. So that's the reason why you see that interest payment going up there, because then after that, the interest does accumulate. All right. Interfund transfers. And that's just the LG, I guess an LG&E lease that, or I guess contract that we have where we have been repaying on that debt to the county. And so that's just based on the amortization schedule of that, a little bit of a decrease next year. All right, so coming here to expenditures, total expenditures of $306,473,769. If you look at that in comparison to what we had for this current we'll see a $13 million decrease there related to the cuts that we made. Our fund balance then is just right at the 3% requirement. If you look down to 34755, assigned for education school bus replacements, that is one of the areas where we have cut down our reserve, taken some money out of that. And then on the lease reserve that we had reduced in the amendments, build back in a little bit of a reserve for that, not at the level that we had been at, the $5,033,000, but putting some of that back in there. That pretty much covers everything for the GP fund. Any questions? All right. All right, I'm gonna take a little quick drink here so I can keep talking. All right, federal projects. So really, federal, there's nothing really changing a lot on our federal projects, except for one item that I'll get to. So, we receive our allocations from the state, and what we do is we go in and we budget our allocation, and then also budget based on our looking at our funds and looking at what anticipated carryover we have. And so none of our grants really changed. There were two ATSI grants that we do not have next year, but other than that, most of the grants are the same. But looking down in federal revenues, 47590, there where it has Title IV, Read to Be Ready, and CARES Act. So we have been notified that we will receive an allocation on the CARES Act. And so we have budgeted it in that revenue code there. And then when we get over onto the next page with expenses, you'll see where we have put that in. So overall on revenues in federal, we have a $5.2 million increase, and primarily related to that CARES Act allocation. All right. And then really on the expenditures throughout all of the federal project, they're really pretty much all the same. The one thing related to that CARES Act, so since we don't actually have, the state has not put anything out in E-Plan as far as accounts or where to budget or what's available, we have put that in the other charges account until we actually receive that allocation and go forward and budget in the specific line item. So you will see that very large $1.2 million or 1.2% increase there, and that's related to just putting those funds in that account until we are able to receive more information as far as actual accounts to budget that in. So really, like I said, other than that, all of the expenses remain pretty consistent throughout all of the functional areas. You just want to, if David wants to scroll, and you can just kind of, if you look at the total on each area.
Yep. Maybe you can keep scrolling up.
You want me to scroll back up?
No.
I think he's saying just keep scrolling.
Okay.
Yeah. Each of those areas are pretty much all the same. The only one there on interfund transfers, you will see a decrease there, and that is a decrease in our indirect cost rate. So if you'll remember over on the GP side, we had a decrease in that revenue. So that's the indirect cost is where federal pays indirect cost to the GP fund. All right. Federal projects. The next one will be our Child Nutrition Fund. And really nothing significantly changing on that. If you look at total revenues this year of $18,999,370 versus the total revenues I'm sorry, the new budget revenues versus the current budget, they're fairly consistent there. If we go over to the expense side, pretty much everything here is status quo. There are a couple items. The garbage disposal fees there of $43,000 is one line item that we're doing a share allocation between the GP fund and the child nutrition fund. And then if you look down the second line from the bottom, the utilities, object code 442, you'll see that increase there. And I had talked about that in the GP fund, how we're doing the cost allocation between those two. The only other, they did make a reduction on 399 maintenance contracts, went in and did a decrease on that. I believe that's related to, they had been doing cafeteria refreshes. And so I think they have gotten, I think, a majority of those done. And so reducing that line item. And then going to the next, they did make a reduction in in-service staff development there on object code 525. And then a decrease in this food service equipment, the last line item there, they have a decrease of $175,000. And then, so earlier they had on food purchases an increase of $502,000. So overall in that fund, an increase of $320,000. So nothing very remarkable there. All right, transportation fund. Really the only change primarily in here is on the basic education program. When we receive our BEP allocation, it funds both the transportation fund and general purpose fund. And so we basically go in and look at the transportation fund to see, what is needed in order to balance that fund. And so based on beginning balance carryover and savings that they have in other areas, we're able to reduce the amount that we have to put into the transportation fund, and that's allocated then all higher amount to the GP fund. So on revenues, that's really the only thing other than a grant, other government and citizens grant that we had this year that I don't think we've received information that we have it next year. Is there a question? Nope. Okay. So it just shows our beginning fund balance there of $2.3 million, giving us a total available funds of $17.3 million for the transportation fund. Looking at expenses, there are not a lot of changes. Line 168 and 187, substitutes and overtime. There's basically a $50,000 reduction in substitutes and a $50,000 increase in overtime. And as you heard Jim talk about in previous board reports, not being able to hire bus drivers and not being able to hire substitutes, we are having to compensate with individuals working overtime to drive those buses. Looking down on object code 412. So we have budgeted, you'll see a decrease in our gasoline, but we budgeted an amount in the diesel fuel, I guess related to the changeover of buses from to diesel. And then if you go to the next page, you'll see there the gasoline item, we have the $871,000 decrease there, and that's related to that diesel. And then transportation equipment has a $261,300 decrease, just related on the buses that we need to purchase. So that overall in the transportation fund, decrease this year or next year budget of $308,949, leaving us with the $500,454 fund balance, which meets our 3% requirement. All right. We're going to love this next one. It's extended schools, and it's exactly the same as last year. So this is where we operate some of our summer school, and then also some credit recovery programs sometimes run through here depending on availability of grants. So really just estimating it the same. And this relates to summer school. Summer school runs in June. This is actually the budget for June of 2021. All right. Yeah, I guess. All right, capital projects. So we have a request of $2,650,000. So we budget that in the revenue, and then also in the expenses. If you will scroll down like 2 pages, then you will see we will see what our projects are. So we basically have gone in and look, or I'll say we, Jim and his department have gone in and looked at, I guess, critical needs, and that's what this is based on, trying to look at critical needs. So basically we have HVAC, pretty much everything on that page, HVAC, unit vents and boiler, building automation system upgrades. And then the next page, chiller, kitchen hood fire suppression upgrades, alarm system upgrades, and building automation system upgrades there. So again, like I said, based on just critical needs there for the total improvements of $2,650,000. And that is it for the budget. If anybody has any questions?
And one thing I want to do, I want to be extremely clear that this budget does not meet our needs. We have needs that are above and beyond, but it's what we have to work with. And this was a grueling process that we went through to essentially take away things that we knew and know currently that are major needs in the school system. We've done well in terms of our performance, and we want to continue to do well, in reference to our performance. We also know that students are going to continue to come to Montgomery County. So again, this is what we have to work with, and my staff did a wonderful job coming together over the course of the last few weeks, given the current environment in the world, to make it happen. So thank you, staff. Again, as Marcia indicated, it's extremely lean, and we'd be glad to take any additional questions if you might have them at this time.
I have a observation, Mr. House.
Sure.
I understand bare bone budgets. I understand the purpose for them, but will this budget cause us to actually have any problems in order to be able to open up new schools or be able to supply the needs of our kids for next year? And do we have a system in place where we can go back to the commission if things do turn out that we need the additional funds, that we can actually go back and reapply?
Yeah, to answer the latter part of your questions, if sales tax, which it very well could be a better outlook than what it currently is. In that case, we would go back to the mayor and the commission to reconsider. And what was the first part of your question, Jimmy?
Making sure that the bare bone budget don't interfere with our ability to be able to provide the services that we need for our students. A lot of times when people see you back to just what you asked for last year, they think that, well, we were giving you too much anyway. But I know that's not the case, but I just want to make sure that we don't put ourselves in jeopardy, or you don't put the staff and yourself in jeopardy by asking.
Our goal was to not lay off, Jimmy.
Yes,
and we're in a situation where we're not laying off.
awesome.
But to say that we're going to move forward and have just as good of a year as we had, academically. I can't say that right now. We're going to do our best in doing so. I think if we would have had some of the positions and some of the funding, much like, the police department, much like fire department, it's going to be tough for them all because they all are going to be making some of these same cuts. So it's going to be a tough year. We don't have some of the financial supports that we need in an extremely fast-growing school system. We essentially are coming back with a very similar budget as last year, and that's what I challenged my staff with early on. But regardless of what happens, we're not going to use excuses. We're going to go bust our behinds and do the best we can for our children.
This is Charlie. I have a question.
Yes, sir.
This is, excuse me, for Marsh, I believe. If you have it handily, do you have the percentage of increase or decrease of this budget and the dollar amount?
Marcia?
If you have it handily, if you don't, that's okay.
Yeah, I can, yeah. I don't know a percentage. I mean, we're pretty much equal to, so our.
Very similar to last year. Marcia will work on that, Charlie, and if
Okay.
she provide it for you, we'll let her crunch the numbers. Any other questions? Okay, at this time, we'll move to item number 3, which is a special course application in reference to Avid. Avid, of course, is one of our supports at the high school level. And I'll allow Dr. Sean Imperatrice, if you'd like to come off of mute and share any specifics in reference to this. Sean?
Yeah, so this is a special course request for the Avid Elective class, which focuses on supporting high school students, first generation college students, ethnically diverse potential college students with advanced level classes. These are average to above average students, mostly in the average range, being pushed into some advanced level classes through this elective class where tutoring's offered, inquiry-based tutoring, working on strategies like focused note-taking, structured writing, critical reading, and then college visits, just to get the idea of I can accomplish these advanced level classes and I can see myself in college. I've been to college, I've visited college. So this class we asked for a course request for because the state eliminated it last year from the course code. So that's what required us to ask for this to be a special course request. I'll take any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Dr. Imperatrice. We'll move to item number 4, which is the Mid-Cumberland District Chair application. This is an application that was submitted by Jimmy Garland. And Jimmy, I'd be glad to let you kind of share some insight because this is not the typical way we would do this, but given that we're meeting virtually, we needed to get insight from each board member and really a signature from each board member. But I believe TSBA has allowed for essentially for us to present it in this manner with the complete board. Jimmy, anything else that you would like to say in reference to this?
The only thing is that they, as long as the board agree, and if it's a up or down vote, I mean, as long as the majority of the board agree, they'll accept the minutes from the secretary for this meeting as the approval for this. And I won't be able to send off my application until I get the board's approval.
Right. Any questions for Jimmy or myself in reference to number 4?
This is Charlie again. Would we be able to do that in a study session?
The study session, well, it'd probably be better if we did it in a general session, but we could do it in the study session.
Yeah.
It's not due until July the 1st.
We've got time. Thank you, Jimmy.
Yes, sir.
Madam Vice Chair, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mr. House. Is there any further business in addition of business?
At this time, I'd like to open it up to county commissioners for any comments. Okay, the only other business that we have is that I've kept you guys pretty much up to date on a probably twice a week in reference to the number of lunches that we're providing. I think we're up to 270,000 meals that we've provided during the pandemic episode that we've had. The learning resources that were provided, the revamping of the website. There's been a lot of work. I don't think my staff and myself have worked so hard in such a short period of time, scrambling and recreating the wheel in many instances in terms of how we operate. But I'm very proud of what that looks like. One of the things that we really had to take a close look at with the support of the State Board of Education is what grading opportunities look like. And I'd like to allow Dr. Mason Bellamy just to share a bit with you in reference to what that looks like right now in terms of our grading opportunities and the changes that have occurred via the State Board of Education's vote most recently. Dr. Bellamy.
Thank you, Mr. House. Good evening, board members. So, on April 9th, the State Board of Education met and decided that a student will be given no grade lower than what they had earned on March the 20th. But that they also said, rather than doing a pass-fail mechanism, which is what we were kind of expecting, that students would be issued numeric grades. And that was largely in part due to a need at the state level to make sure all students were on a level playing field as it relates to the HOPE Scholarship, which you'll recall to get the HOPE Scholarship, you need a 3.0 GPA or a 21 on your ACT. And so because they offered and said specifically in their language that students should have the opportunities or districts were allowed to give opportunities to improve grades as they relate to the HOPE Scholarship, district leadership, my principals were all unanimously in support and felt like we needed to allow those opportunities for our students so that they could continue to compete for the HOPE Scholarship. If we had a senior with a 2.98 and needed to raise a grade in order to access that money for college next year, we felt like we needed to do whatever we could to support that. Additionally, student athletes have requirements for GPAs, both at the NCAA and TSSAA levels. And so there was a need across the state to make sure that numeric GPAs were given, and a pass-fail system didn't allow for that. So to allow for that for our students, we've created a situation where high school students and students in credit-bearing courses, so we do have some 8th graders in Algebra 1, are allowed to do some additional work in relation to the third 9 weeks assignments that they had already been given, either resubmitting an assignment that perhaps they missed because of absence and they would have had time to make up had we been back in, or opportunities for teachers to create additional assignments. And so I think Mr. House has shared a one-pager with you all with that information just briefly, but I just wanted to share the hard work that's going on at the high school level to allow those opportunities for our students. Very proud of the principals and the teachers that, again, every single group we spoke with both TEA and with PET, and everyone said that it was the right thing to do for our kids to allow those opportunities, and the principals and the teachers then came together and made it happen. And so just excited that that's going on for our students in Montgomery County and our credit-bearing courses. And just something that I think is a real point of pride and a real bright spot to keep our kids on a level playing field with the other district that was able to allow those things as well. So if you have any questions about that or anything else I can answer for you in regards to those opportunities for our high school students, I'd be happy to.
Thank you, Dr. Bellamy. Again, as he mentioned, we'd be glad to provide you with additional insider information if you have any questions. I know I've probably overwhelmed you guys with information over the course of the last several weeks just to keep you up to speed, but I think it's important for you all to know exactly every move that we're about to make or that we're making as well. With that being said, Madam Vice Chair and Madam Chair, that does complete any business that we have.
Well, if all business is completed, I declare this meeting adjourned.
Thank you all. Have a good one.
You too.
Thank you. Take care. Stay safe.